Welcome to the Forward Marketing Podcast, the podcast that covers internet marketing strategies and leadership tactics to move your business forward. With your host, Joshua Jarvis. Hey, and welcome back to the Forward Marketing Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Joshua Jarvis, and I almost said I'm super excited to be here. And then I thought, over the last year, how many times have I said I'm super excited to be here? Because I am. It is my pleasure to bring you different things. I actually have a lot of fun researching the articles and things that I sort of bring to the podcast. You know, what I found after a year of podcasting was that, you initially have some ideas and things you want to cover, but then you sort of run out of things to cover that are sort of core things that you do. And you've got to do research. You got to stay relevant. And that research has been a lot of fun. I've been able to, I just watched one of the Whiteboard Fridays about a search that, sort of a research that was done on kids doing searches on Google for, what does dolphins eat? And that's a great whiteboard. If you just like to be entertained, if you want to hear some anecdotes of, how children search, and it's just one of those sort of fascinating things because not only does it show sort of the progression of how search has sort of changed our lives in a sense that because we can type into a computer and get an answer, those answers are influencing what we think is true. Not only that, but it's also becoming a skill set in a sense that someone that is able to search better than others is able to get better answers than others. And so it's really, really worth watching. It takes maybe 15 minutes of your time, especially if you watch it on 2X like I do. So hopefully you enjoyed the last few weeks of episodes that we've done. Really trying to cover some of the most requested things, as well as just some hot sort of growth hacking topics, maybe not growth hacking. But today I kind of want to go back to some of my roots here. One of the things that I love to cover was SEO. And so some people ask me, Josh, at Forward Marketing, at Forward Digital Marketing, what do you specialize in? What do you do? And unfortunately, my answer is that I'm basically a jack of all trades. I've had to be because it's just me. And because before I was doing this sort of full-time, I did it for another business. And I was the founder and the owner of the business, so I had to wear multiple hats. Doesn't mean I'm actually excellent at any of those. It just means that I've had to do pretty much everything that you can think of when it comes to marketing a business, particularly online, because I didn't really like to do the direct mail or face-to-face type sales or cold calls, that sort of thing. So I focused on online. And one of the areas I really liked was SEO. So search engine optimization. If you're not familiar with that, that's what that means. And I'm going to kind of go on why it matters and what it is in a second. And that's really the topic of today. But that is the thing that I really love. And one of the reasons why I love it is because one, it's kind of like a game. Google has this search algorithm, and you are crafting this piece of content to be found. And so, as it goes up higher and higher and higher, it becomes just really, like I said, just really interesting to sort of watch that. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today. So why does SEO matter? So really, what is it? SEO is really simply imagine writing a rough draft and then editing it for your audience. And that's really what it is. So you've got a piece of content, maybe let's say you've got on your heart, you want to write about something, and then so you write it. And so SEO is only thinking about something strategically so that it can rank for what people are searching for. A good example of this might be a podcast like this podcast, or perhaps better yet, a good example of this is a speaker. Now, when a speaker gets ready to speak for an audience, so I'm sure you've been to a conference, or some of you, like myself, we go to church, and the speaker, in this case, if I was using the church example, the pastor, every speaker has sort of a thing that they want to accomplish. So let's say you went to a leadership seminar, and that talk about leadership isn't going to change. There are some key leadership principles. You guys know I mentioned leadership even in the thing because it's one of those things I'm super passionate about. And I really love leadership, but there's characteristics, there's things about leadership that don't change and they're just facts of life, so to speak. So like humility is a researched thing that, in fact, the research on it from Kouzes and Posner says that humility is a characteristic that everyone identifies in leadership. They don't identify pride. They don't identify charisma. They identify humility as a characteristic of great leadership, right? So that's a definitive thing, right? So if I was going to give a speech on leadership to an audience, it would probably include the topic of humility, right? So if that's the case, what might be different, though, is that let's say I was talking to, again, my former business was real estate. So let's say I was talking to real estate agents. Then I would use examples and I would use the vocabulary of real estate agents, right, in my speech, because that would make a lot of sense. It wouldn't make any sense to them as much, or I wouldn't connect with the audience as much if I used words that were from, say, the medical profession and talked about leadership and from that angle. There's challenges. Each one of you listening has a different business. Now, the businesses, for the most part, have a lot of the same mechanics, right? There's still sales, there's still accounting, there's still budgets to run, there's new clients, there's onboarding procedures, there's new hires, all that, right? But however, one business may differs completely from the next as far as vocabulary goes, as far as some of the unique challenges that each business has inside of those sort of fundamental things. So SEO really is just taking that and saying, okay, who is this for? Like, I have a piece of content, and who is this for? So I get a lot of emails or phone calls, and or when I see people who listen to podcasts in my local area, they'll say something like, hey, what is SEO really? Or they'll be listening, and they're a business owner, and it's kind of like they don't have time to be really thinking about SEO. And then when they reach out to people who are selling SEO services, it kind of feels a little bit like snake oil, right? So it's like, oh, they're going to make me rank higher and all that, but they don't really explain what it is. And they don't understand, and what they don't explain is that SEO really needs to be part of your overall marketing package. It's not, someone shouldn't hire me to do SEO in sort of a silo and then go and do other things. No, SEO works best when it's integrated within the other things, because SEO is really tailoring everything to match the audience that it's actually targeting, right? So that's really what SEO is. And one of the things I wanted to talk about once you've got you understand what SEO is, but how do you actually do it? And to me, there's really sort of three main components of sort of the SEO strategy, if you will, outside of the sort of minutia of the title and meta tags and all these little nerdy things, schema markup and all that. If you want to learn about that, we actually covered that SEO like in several weeks in a row, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But if you go to forwardmarketing.com, you'll see, one, that I'm probably not actually doing a lot of these things, because it's kind of like the cobbler's children that has no shoes. Like, I don't have time to actually spend a lot on my website when I'm working with clients. But if you go there is a wealth of information that I've documented in the podcast, as well as in the early days, I was actually writing out really long blog posts to go with the podcast. So you would have like really, really good show notes. And so it's a great resource. There's a blog post called SEO FAQs, which is frequently asked questions that I get all the time about SEO. And then also the just in general, like how to rank, what to do. Like that is people have told me that I should take that down and turn it into a course and all of that, and maybe I will one day, but for right now, it's a great resource. If you are at all curious and not advanced in this, go back and listen to those. But there's really three main components. There's the content quality, right? So it's the page that you want to rank has to be quality content. You have to be able to say, send this over to your friends and have them look at it and give you their feedback. The other thing is that you need to so you have the content, and that's got to be great. The other thing is got to have good site structure. Okay, so what I was sort of having a mid thought there previously, but basically what you're looking at is you've got your content, but then you've got to make it so where robots can actually find it. And we talked about basically how does Google actually find your pages in another episode. But essentially what it does is, if you can imagine something crawling along a tree. So that's why they call it a spider. So the spider is crawling along your site, and it lands on, let's say, your homepage, right? So then you have to have links from the homepage, right, that point to these other pages. So if you create a new page of content, then it needs to be easily found. And so your site needs to be organized. So we've had clients before, particularly in e-commerce, it's really easy to create multiple categories, because you're like, well, hey, my blue widget, this blue shirt, let's say it's a blue polo shirt, right? It could be in my blue shirts category. It could be in my men's shirts category. It could be in my golf shirts category. It can be in all of these things. And what happens a lot of times is that the site becomes really unorganized. You're confusing the user to some extent, and you're confusing the spider bot, Google spider bot, by doing that. So you really want to have clean architecture. That's why it's great to have, your main pages that you want to rank for, your service areas, your service things, and you can have a blog, and then, some categories, but don't go overboard with the categories, and then, just go really deep, but always be linking back to, like, if you try to blog, for instance, one of the most effective things you can do, this is like a pro tip for listening, is actually taking the content in your blog and making a point to link back to one of your service pages every single time. But the service page has to be optimized as well. So, like, let's say, for instance, I wanted to rank for Atlanta SEO company. What I would do is I'd write 10 blog posts, and then I could mention Atlanta SEO company in every one of those blog posts and point back to it. Now, that in itself won't cause it to rank, but it's just kind of give you an idea of the kind of structure. So because what's going to happen is that basically the spider is going to look for all these pages, but it's going to see the pages linking back to the pages. So like in my blue polo shirt example, essentially what you're telling Google is that blue polo shirt is really, really, really important, but maybe these categories and these other things, which is really what you want to rank for on an e-commerce site, is the category pages. You're going to kind of miss it. So you might rank okay for this blue polo shirt, but you're going to be sort of failing when it comes to men's polo shirts. So if that gives you a good example, I don't know, but kind of track with me. So there's really three components in my mind. So there's the content, has to be quality, has to be top notch. Site structure, again, it can't be messy, and that's the takeaway. Like if you were really like just kind of rolling your eyes, or maybe your eyes are glazing over, either one, when I was kind of talking about these examples, because I was kind of fumbling through it. The big takeaway is you just don't want a messy site structure, okay? You want to be able to find the content. You want to be able to find your best content first, all right? The other thing is called domain authority, and that term kind of comes from a company called Moz. It used to be an SEO, sort of like an SEO hub for people who liked SEO. And they had a lot of great resources. The resources are still there, but the site itself and the company feels really, really outdated. In fact, the whiteboard thing I mentioned was actually from Moz. So, I mean, it's still putting out great content in a sense, but they just kind of feel outdated. But that domain authority is a term that kind of stuck around. And before it was something else that you might have heard of, was Google PageRank. And if you've ever been on Fiverr or any of these other sites where they sell links, a lot of times they'll sell links and they'll say, hey, so many DA, which is domain authority, or so much PR, which is PageRank. Now, unfortunately, if you see that kind of stuff, it's kind of hard because DA doesn't really exist, and it's sort of in the same way that it used to, and then neither does. And certainly PageRank doesn't exist anymore in a sense that you can actually pull the numbers like you used to. So what is domain authority now? Well, really what it means, it's just basically a term for how well your page can rank. So a domain authority 100, which is, I don't know if it exists or not, but would be something like Facebook or Google or Apple. The authority of that domain, the stuff that they put on those pages are super, super relevant. Like very, very, very relevant. Whereas a brand new website will have a domain authority of 0, right? Because it has no real authority. So what the two main metrics of domain authority is the age of the site, and then how many links are going to the site. So if you want to have high domain authority, you need to be around for a little while. And Google does this thing called sandboxing. So if you get let's say you get a new domain, you're like, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to be the number one business in this area, and let's say you get a super keyword relevant page. So let's say you sell blue widgets, you get bluewidgets.com. Or a better example is a lot of real estate agents. They'll get, AtlantaHomesForSale.com, right? It's so very literal. Now, Google doesn't give you bonuses. It does give you a bonus, but it doesn't give you the kind of bonus it used to when people were that sort of overt, over the top, keyword sort of driven. But let's just say you got that domain. Well, what Google's going to do is put you in what they call a sandbox and says, okay, I'm just going to kind of set you over here. I'm going to see what you do. Are you going to engage in spammy tactics? Are you going to buy links off of Fiverr, for instance? Are you going to create thousands and thousands and thousands of pages that might create duplicate content? We don't really know. We can't trust you. You're the new kid on the block. And so we're going to set you over here and let you build some trust. And so age of the domain matters quite a bit because the longer the site's been around, the more sort of right you have to be there, right? You haven't engaged in negative tactics for a long period of time, therefore you might be more trustworthy. Imagine the same thing with a service provider. If you were going to hire a painter to come paint your house and you interviewed them and you set them down, and one person said, well, last month I got my painting license. I don't have those, but let's say I got my business license and I started painting full time. You'd say, great. I got a lot of energy, really like them. I think they're great. And then you interview someone else. This is, well, my company's been painting for 50 years in this local area. Which one of those two are you going to pick? You're probably going to pick the one that's been around for a long, long time because chances are good they're a little bit more trustworthy than the other. And that's really the whole concept behind age when it comes to domain authority. There are exceptions, just like they are when you interview people, right? The other thing is linking domains, and this is the part where it gets kind of heady, kind of hard for you to actually do it and execute on it. Age is hard to execute on, and you either got it or you don't. But when it comes to linking domains, so basically that's how you measure. Like if someone says something like, I'm going to sell you a link, right? So first of all, it's probably, you really want to watch out for that. You don't want to buy links off of places like Fiverr and whatnot. But let's say that you're going to get a link from a website and you want to determine, is this going to help me, or is this, it doesn't really hurt you quite as much, but is this going to help me, or is this going to be a waste of money and or time? Let's say you're guest posting. The way to do that is to see how many domains are linking to it. But not only how many domains are linking to the site, but also the quality of the links. And so this is kind of a tough subject for me to go into in a podcast, right? So to me, it's better to show you, to talk about it in sort of a different way. So imagine you're looking at a service provider and you're looking at their reviews, and they have a lot of reviews. And so you're going through these different service providers, let's say the painter, for the example. Which one would you likely use? Would you use the one with no reviews? That's a little odd. No, probably not, right? So obviously the reviews in my example are like links. Would you use reviews from, let's say you look at the reviews and you see that they have like 4,000 reviews. You're like, wow, that's really great. But then as you're scrolling, you kind of notice that the user only reviewed one company, right? So you start noticing that all of these reviews, especially the 5-star ones, are only from someone who's reviewed one product. That's a little suspect. And Google thinks so too. And so when you get links from places like a Fiverr or these call them like link farms, or someone creates, they call them Web 2.0 links, but there's no substance to them, right? There's only this one link that goes to you, and it doesn't have any substance. Those don't have any value whatsoever. In fact, they could hurt you. And so Google knows this and says, no, those don't count. Which is kind of funny, considering that if you go into the Google App Store, you'll find a bunch of apps that have a ton of fake reviews, right? I'm sure we've all seen the apps that have these great reviews. You're like, why do they have these great reviews? This app is awful. So anyway, But let's say you look at one service provider and they have a bunch of great reviews, and they have some, not so good reviews, but you can clearly see they're getting reviewed. And then you see that the people who are reviewing review a lot of products. Like Yelp does this very well. Well, they will actually sort of bury good reviews from people who only review one product or one service. But if someone reviews a lot, they will sort of promote that review. Right, so that's the same sort of thing that's happening with Google. Google says, hey, this page has a bunch of links, or this domain has a bunch of links pointing to it that are also good. And so it's kind of because it's spidering each page, it knows what's linking to what, right? So the components of SEO are really the quality content, your site structure, and then this domain authority, which is really links, right? So that's really when someone says, hey, Josh, what do you do? What is SEO for you? Well, it's one, structuring the content that matches the audience. It's creating sometimes technical things on the page so that Google can see the site structure, can see what we're trying to do with the content, and then it's really building links to the pages, but high quality links. And the best way to really do that, and we've got some episodes on this, is having a very specific link building strategy, from guest posting to outreach to becoming an influencer. And that's really sort of the in a nutshell what SEO is and why it matters. And you can see that if you're trying to become an influencer in the space, and you're trying to create a buzz around your around your product or service, you can see why it needs to be integrated with everything. Why your designer and your content writer and your print marketing and all that stuff should match up, and the message should match up, because it's all targeting the target, right? We're only trying to hit to communicate with the audience that is our potential customers, and the more laser focused we get on that, the better the results are going to be. And that's where SEO comes into play, and that's why SEO, the tactics and the concepts around SEO, as far as tailoring the content to the audience, can actually be applied across multiple disciplines. And so that's why SEO matters. That's why the thought process matters. Are we going to have SEO forever? We'll have it as long as we have search engines. But the idea of tailoring content to match the audience has been around longer than that. That's called direct marketing. You really want to target your audience on this. And so, like I said, as long as there's search engines, and what is a search engine? There's a bunch of them outside of Google. There's YouTube, Amazon, iTunes. All of these are search engines, and understanding how they work. LinkedIn is another one. It's really important. All of these have things that you can do to be found and to tailor the content to the specific audience in each one of these channels. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Just wanted to cover it. I get that question a ton about SEO, and just kind of wanted to go into it because it is one of my passions. And next week we're going to talk about sort of the marketing tool belt that you need to have, that every business needs to have some of these tools, and sometimes they're paid tools. So it may feel like I'm trying to do like an affiliate stuffing episode, but most of these, the ones, because I've already done the notes on the page, most of these I actually don't have any affiliate agreements with. So I'm going to give you some examples of them, but we'll just kind of go into, like, if you have a small business, here is the marketing tool belt that you really need to think about having. And some of these are, I'm going to tell you up front, some of these are requirements. Having email is a requirement, whereas others, doing A/B testing, for example, and having a tool that's able to do that might not necessarily be your first priority, but maybe something that you want to get to. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to tune in next week for the sort of marketing tool belt. And as always, if you have questions, comments, anything that you want to share with me, feel free to email me at joshua@fordmarketing.com. That's the number 4rdmarketing.com. And if you want to see the show notes, it's fordmarketing.com, just like my email. And as always, if you like anything I'm doing, please go to iTunes, leave a review, rate it, and then the greatest way to show me love is to share the podcast with someone else that would love this podcast. So anyway, thanks so much for listening, and make it a great day.